They didn't even look us in the eye when they cast the vote. Representatives of over 300 galactic species filled the assembly hall of Enoch's Ring, a space station that orbited nothing, built in neutral space where politics were supposed to rise above bias, above instinct, above war. We helped build it. We bled to keep it standing during the Ragnar Wars. We even buried our dead in its foundation. But today all those favors, sacrifices, and friendships were buried with them. We find the species designated human, a destabilizing element to galactic peace and cooperation. The statement began. Captain Elias Vaughn stood in silence, eyes fixed on the speaker podium, his jaw clenched, hands behind his back, body locked in parade rest, the old military habit he never dropped even after retiring. His uniform was black, stripped of insignia just like the rest of the human delegation, stripped of rank, stripped of identity, stripped of belonging. The verdict was unanimous, except it wasn't. A few abstained, none voted no. One by one, the holographic seals of species representatives turned crimson. Expel Earth, ban humanity, close all diplomatic, technological, and trade ties permanently. They didn't even flinch, not the four-eyed serpent delegates who stole Earth-sea mining tech and reverse engineered it, not the blue-skinned Vari whose home world we helped terraform, not the Crothans who used to toast to human honor after we saved their last queen during the siege of Dranis. No one flinched. Elias didn't speak, not then. He walked out first. No fanfare, no slamming of fists, no dramatic farewell, just silence. That silence weighed more than any speech he could have given. Behind him followed Ambassador Kira Thorne, Admiral Mason York, even the youngest envoy Daniel Ho, who still believed in peace until the last second. They said nothing. The chamber remained quiet as the human delegation left, even as the door hissed shut behind them. Back on the human cruiser Ares, Judgment docked silently outside Enoch's Ring. Elias finally spoke. We're done begging. Kira nodded. They wanted a reason. We just gave them one. York leaned over the console. Do we pull all assets, embassies, listening posts, trade hubs, all of it? Elias said. Burn every bridge. Let them choke on their own unity. Daniel hesitated. But we have people out there, civilians, colonists, scientists. Not anymore, York replied coldly. Now they're exiles. No, Elias corrected. Now they're ours. No more flags but Earth's, no more loyalties but our own. They all felt it, that cold anger that settled like a stone in the gut. The kind that no protest, no negotiation, no appeal could cure. Humanity had been tolerated, feared, used, but never accepted. Not really. And now that we'd grown strong enough to stand shoulder to shoulder, they decided we didn't belong. They were right about one thing. Elias thought we don't belong with them. He walked to the comms console, opened the planetary relay, and broadcast on an open frequency, galactic-wide. This is Elias Vaughn of Earth. To those who cast us out, we heard you loud and clear. And we are not asking for mercy. We're not asking for understanding. We're not asking to come back. He paused, letting the silence carry. You think you ended us, but you just freed us. No more compromises, no more waiting in your shadows. You showed us who you are, and now we'll show you what that made us. He cut the signal. Where do we go? Daniel asked. Elias turned toward the stars, eyes sharp. Home, he said, and after that we build bigger than before, smarter, meaner, stronger. They want to see what humanity becomes. Without their chains, he turned to York. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. The silence after Elias Vaughn's broadcast didn't last long. Galactic comm channels exploded in a storm of voices, warnings, threats, condemnations, most from cowards hiding behind polished diplomatic language. Some begged us not to overreact, fearing retaliation. Others laughed, actually laughed, believing we were done, finished, isolated. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. Elias stood in the war room aboard the Ares Judgment, facing a rotating holographic sphere, the current layout of Earth's off-world assets, colonies, stations, and Black Ops projects. Status, he asked, voice cold and clipped. Admiral York stepped forward. Tall, squared shoulders, skin leathered by war. We've begun the recall protocol. Civilian stations in Zone 4 and 5 are packing up. Outer Rim colonies, Kasari, June 5, and Hadron Rechar, shutting down non-essential operations. ETA for full disengagement, 3 weeks. 3 weeks is too long. Elias snapped. We have targets on our backs now. Accelerate extraction, pull military. First, if civies get stranded, they'll adapt. York hesitated, then nodded. Understood. Kira Thorne, the only diplomat left who hadn't sold her spine, leaned forward. Her face showed no fear, only fury. An X-ring has already begun freezing Earth's assets, seized the bank accounts of over 6,000 Earth-based corporations. 43 embassies locked out. They're gutting us economically before we even hit atmosphere. Elias didn't flinch. Let them. We needed that illusion stripped. No more pretending we were part of something bigger. He stepped forward, hand-wiping the holographic interface to reveal the darker map. Project Dreadlight, a file that only 3 humans were cleared to see. A Black Ops shadow program, developed under the radar, not for defense, not for diplomacy, for domination. Open Dread, he ordered. Kira's eyes widened. It's not ready. That thing's a nuclear sledgehammer in a glass room. We don't need ready. Elias growled. We need ruthless. Project Dreadlight had started 15 years ago when Earth finally admitted the truth. Peace with the galaxy was a lie we bought into because we needed time. Time to grow, time to evolve, time to survive. While we were sharing blueprints and aid packages, they were studying us, cataloging our biology, our tech, our psychology, preparing for the day we'd get too bold, too powerful, too human. And now that day had come. Elias brought up the specs. Black matter, engine prototypes capable of folding not just space but probability. AI-enabled autonomous fleets run by code no species could predict. Planetary cloaking arrays designed to mask Earth entirely from galactic sensors, and most importantly, weaponized entropy delivery systems. Silent, invisible, fatal to entire ecosystems. Designed to erase, not conquer. York exhaled. You're seriously deploying this? That's not war. That's the price of betrayal. Elias cut him off. They wanted us gone. Let's become their nightmare. A long pause followed. Then York gave a single nod. Orders, sir. Elias turned to the command interface and spoke 3 words. Activate Exodus Protocol. Back on Earth, everything changed in hours. The United Earth Federation, a limp political body built to appease Alien Courts was dissolved overnight. The Human Defense Accord replaced it. Military-industrial coalition built by veterans, engineers, and survivors, not politicians, not diplomats. Recruitment centers overflowed, not because of propaganda but pride. Men like Tyson Granger, a scrapyard mechanic from old Texas, signed up with oil still under his nails. He didn't believe in politics, but he believed in payback. Women like Commander Reina Vasquez returned from retirement, swapping her quiet Martian vineyard for the cold grip of a warship's controls. Boys like Malik Oren, barely 17, hacked the planetary net just to force his enlistment past age protocols. Humanity didn't collapse, it hardened. Factories that once made peace cruisers began crafting shadow corvettes. Orbital rings glowed red with activity. Asteroid belts were seeded with dormant mines. Deep-sea colonies that had been research outposts converted into weapon depots. Every alliance was erased, every weakness purged, and still Elias Vaughn said nothing to the galaxy. No declarations, no threats, no apologies. Silence was our final message. 6 weeks later, a very diplomatic convoy entered Sol system, unannounced. Arrogant, ignorant, they hailed Earth, expecting fear, expecting diplomacy, expecting the same humans who once sat at their feet for scraps of recognition. The convoy never reached Mars. A single human stealth ship, Spectre 13, intercepted. No negotiations, no prisoners. By the time the galaxy got word, all that was left of the convoy was a 3-second transmission of static and a rapidly expanding cloud of debris. And that's when the rest of the galaxy realized Earth was gone, not destroyed, not abandoned, not dead, just invisible. Cloaked, cut off, silent, watching. That silence, it terrified them because they didn't know what we were building. In the dark, in the hidden orbital base, known only as Helix Station, Elias stood before the first prototype of the Dreadlight-class Vanguard. Sleek, black as void, built not to be seen but to erase. Its beautiful, York muttered, eyes scanning its razor-like hull. Elias didn't respond. His eyes weren't on the ship. They were on the men, the ones walking onto it, the ones who volunteered, not conscripts, not pawns. Fighters. He saw Marcus Thne, a former mining boss who lost his brother to a Kreen raid when Earth's plea for help was ignored. He saw Yuri Tanaka, ex Special Ops, missing 2 fingers from a peacekeeping mission gone wrong on Vari Prime, and he saw Riker Cade, no past, no records, just the cold look of someone who wanted revenge, not justice. They didn't salute Elias. They didn't need to. He wasn't just a general anymore. He was the voice of Earth's rage. Kira appeared beside him, holding a data pad. Intercepted chatter from the Serpent systems, she said. They're worried we're planning something. Some of their fleets are positioning near the old neutral zones. Elias smiled, but it wasn't kind. They should be worried. She hesitated. You're really going to go through with this? No negotiation, no terms. He looked at her, not as an officer, but as a man whose species had been judged, shamed, and discarded. They voted us out. Let them see what that vote costs. Weeks turned into months. The galaxy spun on, but a shadow crept into its corners. Trade routes started vanishing. Ships gone silent, unexplained voids open where colonies once bloomed, all near Earth's old sectors, all unexplained, all terrifying. Rumors spread. The humans have gone dark. Humans are building something. Humans aren't human anymore. One by one, small species who had once sided with Earth came crawling back, not with apologies but offers, weapons, secrets, alliances. They were turned away. Humanity had no use for cowards anymore. And then one day Enoch's ring received a signal, a message, short, encoded and chilling. You taught us exile, now learn what it creates. We were your brothers, now we are your reckoning. We are not part of your galaxy anymore. We are the dark between your stars. And still they didn't understand, but they would soon. 3 months after the last human signal echoed through galactic space, the cracks began to show, small at first. Fleeting incidents brushed off by the Galactic Council. A fuel convoy on the outer Vari route vanished, 32 ships gone. Without distress calls, a Crothan deep space station spontaneously depressurized, its emergency systems disabled, no survivors. The Trix satellite array monitoring the Andari belt collapsed inward as if something unseen twisted its support. Arms like paper, individually they were anomalies, together they were a pattern, and someone was watching. High Marshal Drezul of the Crothan Dominion stared at the star map, eyes narrowing. You believe these events are connected? The analyst at his side, a young, trembling Ari with sweat glistening on his leaf-like skin, nodded. Yes. Marshal, the systems involved, they're all within the old human reach, the edge. Sectors Earth once charted, no one's been allowed there for years, no ships in, no ships out. Because Earth left, Drezul growled. They were expelled, they're not permitted to operate in these sectors. Respectfully, sir, the Alori said, I don't think they're asking for permission anymore. The Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session. On Enoch's ring, the speaker of the assembly, an aged Vari noble named Salinvath, stood before a wall of projections showing red zones expanding across the star map. Human activity is confirmed in at least 19 previously neutral systems. We have recovered black box fragments from destroyed vessels. Some show weapon signatures never before seen, quantum destabilizers, gravitational implosion triggers, biological null fields. This is not defense, this is domination. Harkin, diplomat hissed. This is impossible. Earth's resources were severed, their allies dismantled, their economy was gutted, and yet Vayoth said, his voice low, they returned to the dark, and in the dark they thrived. A quiet ripple of unease passed through the chamber. They had all laughed when humanity left without begging. They'd scoffed at the silence, interpreted it as surrender. But now the shadows whispered of something else, something older, something colder. Vengeance. Meanwhile, deep beneath the frozen oceans of Titan's dark side, Elias Vaughn stood in the subterranean control chamber of Helix Prime, Earth's true capital now. Not Washington, not Geneva, not New London. Helix was buried in the ice, surrounded by silent, shielded from detection by layers of quantum veils and entropy dampeners, a fortress of thought and revenge. Admiral York entered the chamber, his face lit by the blue glow of 100 data feeds. They're scared, York said simply. We've crossed their line, they're starting to coordinate fleet movements. The Serpent just deployed half their Third Navy near the Driftwood Corridor. The Vari are calling it a containment effort. Containment, Elias scoffed. They voted us out like a virus. Now They want to quarantine us. How poetic. York approached the central hala. Display, we've completed Phase 2. Project Dreadlight is fully operational. Erebus wing deployed last week. 2 systems neutralized in under 4 hours. No survivors, no response time. Elias watched the map with distant eyes. Red dots bloomed like disease across the border worlds, not indiscriminate destruction, surgical eraser. We're not done, he said. Then what's next? Elias turned, his face cold and still dizzied. York blinked. You're not serious. I'm done being underestimated, Ma. They want to fear humanity. Let's earn it. He pointed at the map at the heart of the Galactic Empire, Enix Ring. Silence stretched between them. Elias. That's not a military target. That's a symbol. If we hit it, they made it a symbol when they used it to strip our flag from their walls. Now we burn it. And when it falls, the galaxy will understand. York was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll call the fleet. Across human space, though no one called it that out loud anymore. Whispers of war turned into thunder. The children of Earth were no longer farmers and miners, ambassadors and scientists. They were soldiers, engineers, tacticians, assassins forged in betrayal, tempered in isolation, sharpened by silence. Dreadlight-class destroyers glided like shadows through null space, impossible to track. Sleeper agents embedded years earlier, activated deep within alien territories. The galaxy's tolerance of humans had given Earth the one gift it needed: proximity. Now that gift turned to venom. One by one, planetary defense grids shut down in sectors with no human presence. One by one, starport traffic systems rerouted freight convoys directly into dead zones. One by one, command centers found their data corrupted, their officers poisoned, their leaders vanished. This wasn't conquest, this was retribution. Back at Enix Ring, panic set in. The once grand symbol of unity was now a fortress. Emergency shields shimmered around the station. Patrol fleets hovered nearby. Diplomats evacuated families under the guise of temporary precautions. And then, without warning, silence. All systems offline. No power, no comms, no gravity. The station floated blind and helpless. And in the silence they came. Erebus wing dropped from null space like ghosts. 5 dread-like ships. No markings, no transmissions. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't open dialogue. They unleashed hell. EMP shock waves fried emergency backup systems before alarms could scream. Torpedoes of liquefied entropy breached the outer hulls like scalpels slicing open arteries. Boarding pods coated stealth polymers smashed through the diplomatic wings. By the time the station's defenders reacted, it was too late. They weren't here to occupy. They were here to erase. Elias Vaughn stepped into the ruins of the same assembly hall where Earth had been expelled 9 months earlier. His boots echoed on broken tiles. Fires smoldered in the collapsed ceiling. The walls that once bore the banners of 300 species now hung black with smoke. Currathorn followed him, flanked by soldiers in obsidian armor. You said no survivors, she murmured. Elias knelt beside the speaker's chair. Salen VTH lay sprawled across it, half his body fused with melted metal. His eyes were still open. No survivors. Elias repeated, but plenty of witnesses. Kira nodded, transmitting the footage to everyone. They uploaded It galaxy-wide, a message with no voice. Over just images, the assembly burning. The speaker dead, the flags of every species crumbling, and the silhouette of Elias Vaughn walking through the ashes. The caption was short, "You chose exile. Now live with the consequences." The reaction was immediate: fear, outrage, hysteria. Some species called for war. Others begged for negotiations. A few, the wisest, began evacuating their border colonies, abandoning entire star systems rather than face the dark. And all across the galaxy, children were told a new bedtime warning: be kind to humans or they'll come back. But humanity didn't conquer the galaxy. That was never the plan. We didn't want their systems, their riches, their power. We wanted their memory of us to haunt them, to make every ship that jumps into null space flinch at the shadows, to make every diplomat wonder if the servant offering them wine is really from Earth, to make every leader wake in the night, unsure if that silence in the comms feed is just static or a signal. We didn't become rulers, we became myths. And that was worse. The footage of Elias Vaughn walking through the burning ruins of Enix Ring spread like wildfire through the stars. It was passed from soldier to soldier, screened in backroom war councils, downloaded onto underground networks in elitemies. They played it in black markets and in royal chambers, and everywhere one truth became clear: humanity wasn't coming back. They were coming for everyone, but not in fleets of banners and horns, not in the way galactic empires expected. War, there were no declarations, no occupying armies, just vanishings, just darkness and a growing sense of paranoia that humanity wasn't somewhere far away, but already inside the gates, on the shadow moon of Dethron 6, deep in the core systems. A meeting was held in secret. Species that had once smiled while voting to exile Earth now huddled in fear. A coalition of elites: Vari, Serpentinth, Harkin, Krothan, and even two silent observers from the enigmatic Mindwave Synod. The mood was grim. What do we even call them now? Hissed Exer of the Serpent. They're not human anymore, they're shadows, demons. No, said High Chancellor Vorik of the Vari. His voice was soft but full of dread. They're still human. That's what makes this worse. They didn't become monsters. They were always like this. We just never saw it. The Harkin Prime General slammed a fist against the Blackstone table. Enough of this cowardice. We have firepower. We have fleets. We strike at Earth now, their core, before they spread any further. An eerie silence followed, and then the Krothan ambassador, who had remained silent until now, said quietly, "You already missed your chance. The Earth you knew is gone. The Earth that needed trade, validation, and diplomacy died when you cast them out. Whatever replaced it doesn't care if it lives or dies. It only wants to make you pay." No one argued. They simply stared at the star chart showing how much of the galaxy's edge had gone dark. Back in the Sol system, Earth no longer resembled the cradle of humanity. It was something else now. Fortress, Hive, Forge. Satellites moved in unnatural patterns. Space stations blinked in and out of phase. Mars had become a military production world. Venus was off limits entirely, and the moon had been weaponized to the point of becoming a trigger for something no one outside Earth understood. But inside Helix Prime, Elias Vaughn felt nothing. The victory at Enix Ring hadn't brought him peace. He'd watched the vote that exiled humanity 1,000 times in his mind. He'd memorized the faces of every delegate who didn't speak up, the ones who didn't vote yes but didn't vote no either. Silence, he'd learned, was its own betrayal. But now in the aftermath, silence haunted him again, not the kind from betrayal, the kind from emptiness. He stood alone in the meditation chamber, a steel gray room filled with nothing but cold light and faint hums from the reactors below. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "You ever think we went too far?" Elias turned slowly. It was Kira Thorne. Her uniform was dark, clean. Her boots still bore dust from the wreckage of Enix. Ring, she wasn't afraid of him, never had been, but her eyes had changed. She looked tired, not from work but from watching. He said nothing. She walked closer. That station was a symbol, Elias, not a command hub, not a fleet center. Monument to diplomacy. You leveled it. He looked back toward the glowing wall of data streams. And they used it to erase our voice. He said that place was where they damned us. That's not the point, she said. You didn't destroy a weapon. You destroyed trust, even the few species that might have stood up for us. There were no species that stood up for us. Elias cut her off, voice sharper now. Not a single one put their own skin. The fire, they called us brothers until we stood equal, then they called us dangerous. You call that trust, I call it camouflage, and I've had enough of both. Silence. Kira folded her arms. Some of our own are starting to ask questions. He turned his face now unreadable. Which ones? I won't give you names, she said, but you should know. Some believe we're becoming what they always feared, that we're proving them right. Elias stared at her, then walked toward the command console, bringing up a video feed. It was grainy, pulled from Galactic Records, a human cargo ship under alien attack. No reinforcements arrived, no calls answered. A massacre. 27 unarmed humans slaughtered while the Vari trade patrols watched from orbit and did nothing. This is what they feared, Elias whispered. Not our power, not our weapons. What they feared was that one day we'd stop asking for help. He turned off the feed, and now we have, deep within the Dread Light program, something else was brewing, a unit known only as Sable Division, humanity's blackest of black ops, had gone dark. Even Elias didn't have access to all their files anymore. Led by Riker Cade, a soldier with no past, no records, and no mercy, they operated beyond orders. And now they had begun targeting non-military colonies, agricultural outposts, cultural archives, even nurseries on Kroth moons. No survivors, no messages. York was the first to raise concern. Riker's gone rogue, he told Elias. He's not just hitting infrastructure anymore. He's cleansing. Elias was silent for a long time, then finally pull him in. York frowned. What if he refuses? Elias turned toward the command window, where Earth spun slowly beneath them. Then I'll bury him. Riker Cade did not refuse, he simply vanished. Sable Division's last known coordinates were traced to a derelict mining belt on the edge of the driftward expanse. By the time recon ships arrived, the entire asteroid field had been hollowed out into a massive unseen complex and abandoned but not empty. Inside was a message carved into the metal of the inner dome. The galaxy feared us, you made us devils, so now we wear the horns. It was signed Cade. and underneath a symbol not Earth's, not dread lights, something new, a spiral. Drawn in blood, the beginning of a new faction. Now Elias had a problem. He hadn't just created a war machine, he'd created a fire he could no longer fully control, one born of pain, yes, but now fed by pure wrath. It no longer served strategy, it served vengeance, chaos, power, and within his own command. Doubts were spreading. Kira, York, even some of the senior engineers had started having second thoughts, not about the galaxy, about him. And for the first time since Earth was exiled, Elias Vaughn felt something he hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. He stood alone that night in the hangar bay, watching the dread-like ships rise from the surface of Mars, their hulls humming with unnatural energy. They were beautiful, deadly, perfect, and they had no soul. He thought of his father, an old mechanic who used to fix shuttles in the slums of Luna's underbay. He remembered his voice, greasy hands, tired smile. You fight too hard, you stop remembering. Why? He shrugged it off then, but now Elias Vaughn wasn't sure he remembered anything anymore except the burning. The silence between the stars was no longer peaceful. It was the kind of silence that came after the screaming stopped. Distant colonies had gone dark. Entire systems were erasing themselves from galactic maps just to avoid becoming the next target. Crops were failing, trade routes collapsing, and in hushed circles across frightened alien courts and military bunkers, phrase had taken hold, not official, not confirmed, but whispered in fear. Human purge. It didn't matter if it was true. The fear was real, and the man blamed for it, rightly or wrongly, was Elias Vaughn. But Elias wasn't at a war table anymore. He wasn't issuing grand orders or giving sweeping speeches. He was alone. He stood on the edge of the Helix Prime observation deck, staring at Earth's surface through thick armored glass. Blue marble, once a symbol of life, now pulsed with the scars of transformation. Massive shipyards, defensive rings, cloaked orbital platforms, the flickering signatures of deep space. Weapons no other species even understood. Behind him the room was dark, no guards, no aides, no applause. Because the silence now wasn't fear from others, it was his own people. They were starting to question him, and he knew it. Kira had gone quiet, not defiant, just cold. She didn't argue anymore. She didn't offer alternatives. She just watched. York still followed orders, but his tone had shifted. The loyalty was still there, but it was wearing thin, like armor that had been hit too many times in the same spot. And Riker Cade gone, Offred untraceable. And not alone, they called themselves the Spiral now, born from the ashes of Sable Division. The Spiral didn't answer to Earth, not to dread light, not to Elias. Their symbol, that blood-drawn spiral, was appearing in places no human should be. On the walls of destroyed listening posts, on derelict ships left drifting through black space, even etched into the hulls of vaporized colonies left behind like a message. We were here, you were not enough. Riker had taken hundreds with him, not out of desperation, out of faith, not in Earth, but in pain, in rage, in the idea that Elias hadn't gone far enough. Where Elias had targeted systems of power, Riker targeted symbols of life. He wasn't playing chess, he was burning the board. When York brought the first intel to Elias, the room felt heavier than usual. They hit a civilian moon in the Heroth system, York said quietly. Crothan civilians, farmers, artists, no. Military installations, no reason. Elias didn't look up. They left the spiral. York nodded. Elias finally raised his head. His eyes didn't show surprise, just resignation. Riker's trying to pull the galaxy into full war, force their hand. Then we stop him, York said. Elias' voice dropped. He's ex-Sable. You don't stop him with orders. You stop him with a bullet to the skull. York hesitated. Then I'll do it. Elias turned to him slowly. No, he said. He was my creation. Meanwhile, deep in the wreckage of an abandoned mining outpost floating on the edge of the Nabari Rift, Riker Cade watched his latest recruits undergo trials, not training trials. There was no passing, there was only survival. He stood over a pit where two new spiral initiates fought to the death, not because they were enemies but because Riker believed weakness spread like disease. If one failed in the pit, they would have failed on the field. Better they die now than weaken the spiral's cause. Behind him, a spiral commander approached. Transmission intercepted. Earth Command is preparing an internal sweep. Vaughn may be coming for you himself. Riker smiled, that cold, quiet smile that had earned him the title the Spiral's Ghost. I hope he does, he said. I want him to see what his half measures created. He looked out toward the dark sky, toward the distant stars where Earth lay, cloaked and brooding. They wanted vengeance, he whispered, but all they got was justice by committee. I'm giving them reality, no more warnings, no more mercy. He turned back to the pit. One of the recruits was still breathing. Barely. Riker drew a sidearm and shot him in the head without blinking. He hesitated, he muttered, and hesitation is death. Back on Earth, Kira Thorne had made a decision. She stood in the data vault of Helix Prime, looking through the classified logs. The truth she'd long suspected was now undeniable. Project Dreadlight was no longer defensive. It wasn't even strategic anymore. The protocols had shifted quietly, without fanfare. Phase 4, suppression by fear. Phase 5, cultural reset. These weren't operations, they were ethnic purges. Entire planetary libraries deleted. Species-specific algorithms deployed in biological networks, and worse, new files unapproved, hidden deep coding. Named Final Spiral. It wasn't Elias' program, it was Riker's. And someone inside Dreadlight was feeding him data. Elias' command had been breached. Kira backed away from the terminal, heart racing. If Riker wasn't stopped, Earth's enemies would unite, and this time they wouldn't see Earth as a threat to expel. They'd see Earth as a plague to erase. She opened a secure line to Elias. One way, Elias, she said, voice quiet. I know you still think this can be controlled, but it can't. You wanted revenge. Riker wants extinction. If we don't kill him now, he'll kill everything we built. She paused. Even you. Elias watched the message in silence, then deleted it. He walked to the private hangar alone where the Obsidian Wing, his personal Dreadlight class ship, awaited. He donned the black armor. Not worn since the early raids, it was heavier now. Not physically, emotionally, because he wasn't just going to kill Riker, he was going to kill his own reflection. When Obsidian Wing arrived at the Nabari Rift, Spiral patrols tried to intercept. They died before they could speak. Elias didn't need backup. He didn't need a fleet. He was bringing something heavier than Weapons, he was bringing judgment. He found Riker in the heart of the spiral. Complex, a throne room carved from asteroid steel and blood. Riker stood, smiling. Didn't think you had the spine, old man. Ilia stepped forward, slow, deliberate. You turned vengeance into madness. You didn't go far enough, Riker replied. You wanted them to fear us. I want them to obey. You taught them not to mock us. I'll teach them not to even speak our name. This isn't war anymore, Ilias said. It's butchery. It's evolution. And then the two men who once built the same machine struck. No words, just fists, guns, knives, fire. They fought like wolves, two monsters, two gods. Two men who had seen everything burned and decided to burn more, but one still had something left to lose, and that made the difference. When the knife plunged through Riker's throat, Ilias held it there for a long, painful moment, looking into the eyes of a man he'd made in his own image. Riker gurgled something, maybe a laugh, maybe a curse. Then he died, and Ilias Vaughn stood alone again. He returned to Earth 3 days later. His armor cracked, his left hand burned through the gauntlet. No announcement, no speech, just silence. But when he entered the war chamber of Helix Prime, Kira and York were already there waiting. They didn't salute, they didn't question, they just watched. What now? Kira asked. Ilias looked at the galactic map, red zones flickering, white zones dissolving. Fear still reigned, but now so did uncertainty. We pull back, he said. We consolidate, rebuild. And Riker's followers, York asked. Ilias stared into the hologram. We erase them quietly, thoroughly, and we make sure the galaxy understands something very simple. He turned to them. Both. Earth may be unforgiving, but we are not insane. Kira finally nodded. York exhaled, and Ilias Vaughn, killer, savior, exile, finally said what no one had dared since the vote. We walked away once. He clenched his fist. But if they call us back again, next time we won't leave survivors. They called it the conquered of extinction. It wasn't built in the light. It wasn't negotiated through embassies or sanctioned by votes. It was forged in panic. 37 alien species, some of whom hadn't spoken to each other in centuries, met in the void above Cult, a dead star at the edge of neutral space. The system was ghostly, its planets long stripped of value, its light swallowed by time. But the conquered needed darkness, and in that darkness they plotted how to kill Earth, not defeat, not punish, not isolate, kill, wipe the human genetic line from the stars, erase every colony, dismantle every structure, annihilate every trace, because now they understood the truth. They hadn't exiled a nuisance. They had unleashed a species built to adapt, retaliate, and dominate. And if humanity was left to live, even little, the war would never end. So they brought everything. The Crothan deployed the Hammer, a mobile siege platform with a singularity cannon capable of sterilizing entire planets. The Vari unveiled their secret fleet, the Crystal Chorus, ships powered by psionic resonance, immune to conventional targeting. The Serpent introduced Nextwind, a biovirus designed to dismantle human DNA within hours. And the Harkin did what no one expected. They offered the mind Reavers banned for 1,000 years, a consciousness evolved beyond morality. They had one function now: eliminate all organic life of a designated type. Conquered didn't hesitate. They programmed the Reavers for Homo sapiens. And they pointed them at Earth, back on Helix Prime. The war table pulsed with alerts. Kira stood with Admiral York, eyes grim as she watched the data pour in. This isn't a strike force, York muttered. It's a crusade. They're not coming to fight, Kira said. They're coming to end us. She looked to Elias, standing at the head of the table. He hadn't spoken since the report started. His face was stone. What's the call? York asked. Elias finally looked up. His voice was low but steady. We hold the line. That's suicide, York replied. We can't match that force, not head on. We won't, Elias said. He brought up a new screen, classified even from most of Dreadlight. Project Lazarus, a backup plan never meant to be used. Not unless Earth was on the brink. Kira frowned as the files unfolded. What is this? Not what, Elias said. Who? On the screen, genetic data, neural maps and combat logs scrolled. Clones. Genetically enhanced, memory implanted. Emotionally erased, programmed with battlefield experience and no moral ceiling. This is our last wall, Elias said. They'll hold until the last human gets off-world. Off-world to where? York snapped. We're surrounded. We're boxed in. Elias turned toward Earth's map. The oceans were pulsing with deep blue energy. The Ark ships were ready. 10 of them, each capable of carrying over 5 million humans into deep unmapped space. He looked back at his commanders. We don't need to win this war, he said. We just need to outlive it. 2 days later, the sky above Earth burned. The conquered armada entered Sol from 27 different slipstream points. Their ships blanketed the stars, stretching like a black wave across the void. Hammer charged first, its singularity cannon humming with gravitational tension. Target, Earth's equator. Clean surgical strike to split the planet's biosphere, but the cannon never fired because it exploded. Not from enemy fire, from within. Thousands of nanite clusters smuggled onto the Hammer months earlier through trade with a human-captured freighter detonated in perfect synchronization, tearing the weapon apart from the inside out. And with that single flash, the galaxy remembered what it had forgotten. Humans didn't need numbers, they needed opportunity. The battle began, and it wasn't a battle, it was a slaughterhouse in reverse. Elias didn't send fleets, he sent decoys, ships layered and reflective armor radiating the signatures of war. Cruisers, but carrying nothing but dead metal. Conquered ships fired blindly, wasting ammunition and revealing positions. He didn't protect Earth's atmosphere, he mined it. When the crystal chorus tried to breach from above, the psionic energy activated latent fields embedded in Earth's magnetic poles, converting the ionosphere into a feedback trap. Alien fleets screamed as their minds imploded inside glassy ships. The next wind virus was never deployed because Elias had already captured it months ago and genetically altered it to target everything but humans. Now it was back in the Conquered's hands and leaking across their own command ships. Panic spread, coordination failed, and the Reavers, they never made it to Earth. They were intercepted by the clones, Lazarus units, each one designed to kill Reavers in close quarters combat. Machines against machines, flesh that thought like metal, metal that bled like flesh. It was brutal, it was primal, and the Reavers, for the first time in recorded history, lost. But Earth was still dying. The atmosphere was cracked, cities in Orbit were crumbling, Mars was lost, the moon had been converted into a gravitational disruptor and then detonated to collapse half the conquered fleet. It worked, but it took Earth's tide with it. The oceans rose, volcanoes stirred, radiation licked the edges of cities. It was the price of survival. The Ark ships launched, each one cloaked, powered by black matter drives. Ilias had kept hidden from every other faction, even within Earth. No coordinates, no maps, just darkness and hope. 5 million on each, scientists, soldiers, farmers, programmers, children, the best of what was left, and the rest stayed behind, not because they had to, because they chose to buy humanity's future with their last breath, to fight the conquered down to the last bullet, the last heartbeat, the last inch of Earth. Ilias was one of them. Kira found him on the cliffs of old America, watching the last Ark ship vanish into a dark space rift. She stood beside him, both in combat armor, helmets off. "You could have gone," she said. He didn't look at her. "I never planned to." She waited. "You think they'll survive?" she asked. He nodded. "They'll find a system, build a new world, a better one." She smiled faintly. "Without all this," he finally turned to her. "No," he said, "because of all this." She nodded, and together they turned to face the incoming shadow. Concord's final wave, ships ablaze, screaming vengeance. Ilias Vorn didn't flinch. He raised his weapon and smiled. The darkness between galaxies had no name, no maps, no borders, no stars. Just silence, pure and infinite. The 10 Ark ships drifted through this abyss like seeds cast from a dying tree. Their hulls glowed dimly in the black, powered by engines that distorted time and bent space. For 3 years they moved without stopping. Not because they didn't want to, because there was nowhere to stop. Each Ark ship had its own directive, separate flight paths, unique genetic data banks, different scientific teams. It was Ilias Vorn's last command: scatter us, divide the seed. If one falls, another may rise. And so they drifted in silence, with only whispers of Earth left behind. But the silence wasn't peace. Inside the hulls, humanity didn't forget. On Arkship Horizon Dawn, orbiting a red dwarf star in Sector Theta 9, Captain Arland Wraith stood at the viewport, staring down at the rocky world below. After 3 years of isolation, they had finally found a planet, not paradise, not lush, but viable. Breathable atmosphere, frozen water. Under the surface, volcanic activity to power geothermal colonies. It was raw, harsh, beautiful in the way only survivors could appreciate. He tapped the control console. Status. Woman's voice replied through the comms. Dr. Alina Mavic, lead scientist. No hostile pathogens, radiation levels. Stable, native life is microbial. No evidence of intelligent species. This one's clean, Captain. He nodded. Then we land. The bridge was quiet, but then came the whisper from Lieutenant Scar, a former Dreadlight pilot. "So this is home." Wraith didn't turn. His eyes never left the world below. "No," he said, "this is where home begins." Colonization began fast. Modular bases deployed, tunneling rigs activated, atmospheric stabilizers tested. People, engineers, soldiers, teachers, children stepped onto alien soil, blinking at the crimson sun. They named the planet Vale, after a myth from old Earth, one that meant sorrow and rebirth. Fitting, but something had changed. These weren't the Humans who once begged for inclusion in a galaxy that spat them out, they were harder now, quieter, focused, no anthems, no flags, just work and watchfulness. Because even if the conquered was gone, even if the war was over, the paranoia had not died. And for good reason. Inside the Citadel core, a towering command structure buried beneath Vale's largest mountain, Dr. Mavic studied the long-range deep space scans. Her hands trembled as she replayed the last transmission from Arkship Harbinger, which had gone dark 2 weeks ago. Faint signals, screams, no clear visuals. Only a final encoded phrase from the ship's AI they followed. She brought the data to Rai in person. He read it in silence, then set the pad down on the table between them. They followed, he repeated. After all this time, Dr. Mavic swallowed hard. It's not the conquered, they'd be dead. Scattered, this is something else. They moved through the black like we did, quiet, no detectable energy trails. They're built for this. Wraith frowned. Who the hell would follow us out here? Mavic looked at him. Maybe not someone who hated us, she said. Maybe someone who feared what we'd become. The debate began within hours. The Council of Vale, formed reluctantly by the Arkship's ranking officers and civilian leaders, argued for days. Some wanted to relocate immediately, some wanted to hide, but one voice rose above the rest. Lysa Vaughn, Elias Vaughn's daughter, former comms analyst, kept off the radar for years, unassuming until now. She stood before the council and spoke plainly. My father didn't die to scatter us like cowards, she said. He died to give us freedom, and freedom isn't running, it's choosing to stand when you have every reason to flee. Murmurs, resistance, but no one interrupted. We hold Vale, she continued. We defend it, and if something comes out of that black, we remind them what Earth left behind. Captain Roth stood slow and deliberate. Agreed, he said. We make our stand here. The next months were consumed by preparation. Old dread tech was salvaged from the Arkship's vaults. Drones deployed, planetary defense arrays. Orbital cannons were built, powered by geothermal reactors, and a new unit was born, the Black Guard, descendants of Earth's final soldiers, trained in the simulations of human collapse, raised on stories of betrayal, armed not with ceremony but resolve. They didn't wear ranks, they didn't salute, they answered only to one rule: no surrender. Meanwhile, in the upper reaches of Vale's orbit, the silent enemy arrived. No warning, no broadcast, just a shape. Long, black, coiled like a serpent. Around gravity, a ship but alive. Breathing, constructed from organic metal. No species ever logged it, no record matched. It drifted above the planet for hours, watching. Then it spoke, a single frequency, not a language, not words, just a pulse. One every human instinctively understood. Thread. Captain Wraith watched it through the forward viewport. No movement, Scar reported. It's not launching anything. It doesn't need to. Wraith said. It's waiting for what? Wraith stared. For us, they called it the Echo, not because it made sound, but because it mirrored what we were. A remnant, a response, a warning. Dr. Mavic believed it was some kind of sentient surveillance entity, a product of a civilization that watched from beyond the known stars. Maybe they feared humanity's fall, or maybe they feared what humanity could become after the fall. Either way, the Echko wasn't Here to negotiate, it was a test, and Vale was the exam. The first wave came. 2 days later, small craft organic in fast dropped through the atmosphere. Like parasites, they didn't bomb, they didn't speak. They landed and burrowed. Target, the geothermal veins powering the Vale colonies. Their goal wasn't to kill humans directly. It was to make the planet kill them. Clever, cruel human. But Earth had taught its children well. The Black Guard launched counter-surface units within the hour, mechs designed for subterranean warfare, combat. Engineers with acid-resistant plating. Hackers trained to communicate not with code but with raw magnetic impulse. They went into the ground, and for every alien drone that chewed through stone, a human blade carved through flesh metal. The war was not beautiful, it was quiet and bloody and close. When the last of the parasite ships was pulled from Vale's crust, the planet shook from the detonations below. 58 lives lost, 4 children buried, 1 mountain cracked down the middle, and the echo still watched. Lysa Vaughn stood before the burning skies of Vale and made a choice. We don't wait for the next test, she said. We take the fight upward. Captain Wraith frowned. We don't have the reach, then we build the reach, she replied, or we die waiting. And so began the construction of the Judgment Tower, a vertical shipyard piercing Vale's stratosphere. It would take months, but when finished it would house the first true human fleet since Earth burned, not a fleet of survival, but of reminder to whatever gods, monsters, or watchers dared question if humanity still had fire. As she stood with wrath on the scaffolding of the tower's first platform, Lysa looked out. Over the horizon, crimson winds blew. Across iron-rich plains, drones hummed. Children played in sealed domes. Soldiers trained in silence. They wanted us dead, she said. They still do, Wraith replied, but they forgot something, she said. What's that? She turned, eyes burning. We remember everything. The sky above Vale was black, not from night but from the shadow of judgment. Tower 50 km tall, laced with obsidian, steel and light pulse conduits, it pierced the upper atmosphere like a spear aimed at the stars. Ships clung to its sides like wasps to a hive, sleek, angular, built with dread-like tech, and armed with new weapons forged in exile. Inside its command chamber, Lysa Vaughn stood at the helm of humanity's rebirth. We're ready, said Captain Arland. Wraith. Fleet Command confirms all. Systems green, weapons locked, engines primed, shields calibrated. We can launch in 6 hours. Lysa said nothing. Instead, she looked out the wide curved window toward the stars, but her mind was far away. Message had arrived that morning. Encrypted, old, buried deep in the Ark. S8 ship's black data cache. A voice file, Elias Vaughn, her father. Dead on Earth, burned in fire and blood. His last stand immortalized in silence. She had watched it 3 times and still she wasn't ready. She tapped the console now, and the voice filled the air. Lysa, if you're hearing this, then I didn't make it. Good, that means you did. You survived. You carried our name into the void. You lived, and that matters more than anything I ever did. But listen carefully, because this is where your path splits. If the galaxy ever follows you into the dark, if they chase you across the stars, it means they still fear us. You'll have 2 choices: burn them back, or become something they never expected. Not monsters, not saviors, something new. We lost Earth because we forgot who we were. We tried to belong. We tried to fit, but we were born to stand alone. And when we do, no one can break us. Whatever you decide, make them remember. The message ended, silence returned, but the fire inside her roared. 6 hours later, Judgment Tower launched. Its fleet 20 warships, 10 supply cruisers, 5 long-range recon vessels, hundreds of fighters, a planetary defense grid in orbit, all cloaked. Vale's upper exosphere powered by fusion cores wrapped in black matter. Shielding they didn't rise with. Fanfare, no anthems, no cheering crowds. Just focus. This was a mission to find what followed the Ark ships, to understand what the Echo truly was, to strike first if necessary. Lisa rode aboard the flagship, the Defiant, named not for pride, not for politics, but because that's all humanity had ever been. Within a week, the scouts found it. Again, far beyond Vale's orbit, drifting on the edge of a failed star, the Echo ship unmoving, still but alive. Lisa stood on the Defiant's bridge, watching it on the view screen. "It's waiting," said Dr. Mavic. "Every probe we've sent goes silent within seconds, no debris, no signal. It's absorbing them," Wraith said. "Learning or feeding," Scar muttered. Lisa narrowed her eyes. "No more games." The fleet moved into formation, weapons primed, shields raised, fighters fanned out in circular assault patterns. The Defiant approached the Echo, deliberate precision. When they were 1,000 km out, Lisa opened the comms channel. She didn't speak in language. She sent a pulse, a mirror of the one the Echo had used months before. Then she waited 5 seconds, 10, 30, and then the Echo moved slowly, gracefully, uncoiling like a living serpent made of light and liquid metal. Panels shifted, antenna unfolded, a low frequency hummed through every hull. Scar nearly collapsed at his post, grabbing his head. "Voices I can hear, block it." Wraith shouted, "Activate neural dampeners." They pulsed the fleet's inner field. The humming stopped. Then, without warning, the Echo spoke, not in words, in images, on every screen, every HUD, across every neural interface. It showed them Earth, not the Earth that died, not the fire, not the blood, but Earth before the war, before the exile. Humans helping Vari children in hospitals, human engineers rebuilding Crone cities, human ships bringing supplies to Serpent refugee fleets. Humanity as part of the galaxy. And then flash change, the assembly hall, the vote, the expulsion, the silence. Another flash, the burning of Enix Ring, the spiral Rikercade, and finally Vale, the Black Guard, Judgment Tower, the fleet, and a final image, the spiral in blood. The message was clear. You were beautiful, you were betrayed. You chose fury, but now you are more. Dr. May whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not a weapon, it's a monitor. Watcher." Lisa stared at the screen, "Not of us, of what will become." The Echo made no hostile move. It drifted back, coiled once more, and then dissolved into stardust. No trace, no explosion. It had seen enough. Back on Vale, the message rippled. The war was truly over. No enemies on the border, no ships in pursuit, no alien councils waiting to vote Earth away. Again, just freedom, and with it came the question humanity hadn't asked in years. What now? Captain Wraith wanted to expand, send the fleet to chart new systems, rebuild a web of outposts, assert dominance so nothing like the conquered would ever rise again. Dr. Mavic wanted to preserve, protect Vale, archive what remained of Earth, build a peaceful future. not in fear but in quiet strength. The Black Guard they wanted to fight, they didn't trust the silence, they didn't trust the peace they'd been born in. Trauma and trauma didn't fade easy, but Lysa, she called for something else. Choice, she summoned all surviving council members to the Hall of Stone, a place carved into Vale's oldest mountain. No weapons, no recordings, no commanders, just humans sitting together as equals, and she said they watched us burn, then they watched us survive. Now they're watching what we do next. We are no longer part of their galaxy, but we are still in the universe. We can be their nightmare, or we can be their reminder, not of what they destroyed, but of what we refuse to let die. Let the stars remember this. Humanity walks alone now, but not in hate and honor. We will build, we will protect, we will defend what is ours. And we will never kneel again. And that became the law of Vale. No expansion, no conquest, no return, just strength through independence. Years passed, the children of Earth grew up with no memory of the home world. Their stories were forged from fire, exile, sacrifice. They built cities into the cliffs, farms on the ash plains, solar towers into the skies. Judgment Tower became a beacon, not of war but of warning. Ships still patrolled the dark. Black Guard veterans trained every child to fight, but none had to use it. Because the stars stayed quiet, not from fear, from respect. Humanity had survived betrayal, destruction, isolation, and emerged whole, not as tyrants, not as victims, but as a people reborn, and somewhere in the ruins of a galaxy that once turned its back, stories began to spread of a world beyond the black, where humans lived alone, stronger than ever, unforgiving, unyielding, unbroken. They called them the Forgotten Flame, because no matter how far they were cast out, they never went.